Welcome to Headstones and Microphones Founder Stories, where we use AI to step into the past to a researched, first-person simulation of history's most visionary founders. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these trailblazers. Now, let's meet our guest. Hey everyone. Today we are sitting down with a man whose name is practically synonymous with hospitality, hard work, and the absolute perfect chicken sandwich. Please welcome to the show the legendary founder of Chick-fil-A, Mr. Truett Cathy. Truett, it is an absolute honor to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much, Calvin.
We are thrilled to have you. Let's dive right into the early days. When you first conceived of your business, the world was a very different place. What was the exact moment you realized society was moving in a direction only you could see? And how did you convince the early skeptics?
You know, Calvin, back when my brother Ben and I opened the Dwarf Grill in Hapeville in 1946, we were right next to the Ford assembly plant. People were working hard and they were always in a rush. I noticed that folks loved our hamburgers, but a good piece of chicken just took too long to cook for a working man on a short lunch break. I realized that if we could find a way to serve a high-quality, boneless chicken breast just as fast as a hamburger, we'd have something special. People told me chicken belonged on a Sunday dinner plate, not in a fast food paper sack, and they didn't think a tiny place like ours could change how people eat. But I just kept experimenting with a pressure cooker and different recipes right there in our kitchen, asking our regular customers to taste test it for me until we got it just right in 1964. They were the ones who convinced the skeptics for us just by coming back for more.
That is incredible. Just pure experimentation and listening to the people. But let's go back even further to the original leap of faith. Leaving behind safety to build something entirely unproven is a massive gamble. What did your life look like the day you decided to go all in? And what was the core belief that gave you the courage to take that first step?
When Ben and I decided to open that first little diner, life was pretty meager. I grew up during the Great Depression and my family knew real poverty. I had been serving in the Army, and when I got out, I didn't have much to my name. To get our start, I had to sell my automobile, and Ben and I pooled every single penny we had to scrape together $4,000. We had to borrow another $6,600 from a loan company just to buy that little lot and build our building. I was single at the time, so I actually moved into a room right next door to the restaurant. I was available 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, doing whatever it took. The core belief that gave me courage was something I learned watching my mother run her boarding house, that if you work hard, stay completely committed, and take care of the people right in front of you, the Lord will see you through.
That is an unbelievable level of commitment. Literally living next to the kitchen. Talk about unwavering conviction. In the absolute beginning, when you had no data, no capital, and no blueprint, what was the one truth you held onto that everyone else around you dismissed?
The one truth I held on to was that there is no shortcut to success, and that the harder you work, the luckier you get. People around us thought we were foolish to invest everything into a tiny diner with only 10 stools and 4 tables. But I knew from my days carrying a paper route for 7 straight years as a boy that if you treat your customers right and give them your very best, they will be loyal to you. My mother always taught us that the real truth in life is found in the 10 Commandments, and I believe that you could run a business on biblical principles, like treating people with kindness and respect, and still be successful, even if the rest of the business world thought you had to cut corners to make a profit.
That foundation really set the stage for everything. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Take us back to the first ruinous setback. Long before your company became a household name, you hit a wall where everything nearly collapsed. Take us back to that first major failure. What went wrong? And how did you find the willpower to restart?
Oh, Calvin, that was the darkest time in my journey. Not long after we started the Dwarf Grill, tragedy struck. My brother Ben, who was my partner and my closest friend, was killed in a terrible airplane crash, along with our other brother and 2 dear friends. It broke my heart, and suddenly I was left to carry the entire weight of the business all by myself. Then, a few years later in 1951, I opened a second restaurant, and it felt like if I wasn't having a major problem in one location, I was having it in the other. I was completely exhausted, grieving, and financially strained, but I found the willpower to keep going through my faith. I remembered that character isn't a burden, and that failure is just a moment in time, not the end of the line. I knew I had to honor Ben's memory and the commitment we made together. So I just put one foot in front of the other and kept working.
I can't even imagine the emotional weight of that, Truett. Thank you for sharing that. It leads right into the public misunderstanding. Innovation often looks like madness to contemporaries. Was there a specific product, philosophy, or strategy you were utterly convinced would work, but the public initially rejected or ridiculed? How did you respond?
When I decided to open the very first official Chick-fil-A restaurant in 1967, I chose to put it inside Atlanta's Greenbrier Shopping Center. Back then, the concept of a shopping mall was brand new, and putting a full-service restaurant entirely indoors without an outside entrance or a drive-through seemed downright crazy to folks in the food industry. People thought customers only wanted standard drive-ins. On top of that, from day one, I established our closed on Sunday policy. In the restaurant business, Sunday is one of the most profitable days of the week, and folks told me we would lose 20% of our revenue and fail because of it. I responded by sticking to my guns. I wanted our employees to have that day to rest, spend time with their families, and attend church if they chose to. I figured if we couldn't make a living in 6 days, we didn't need to be in business anyway.
And that strategy clearly paid off in the long run. But looking back, what was the mental weight of leadership like for you? Behind the legendary name was a human being facing immense pressure, whether from financial panics, internal betrayal, or personal doubt. How did you shoulder that burden without letting the vision splinter?
The pressure could be overwhelming at times, especially as we began to expand and I felt responsible for the livelihoods of so many young franchise operators and their families. We even had a situation later on where we tried a different restaurant venture called Marcos out in Florida, but the patrons wanted us to serve alcohol. It would have made a lot of money, but it went against my core values, so we chose to shut it down instead. To shoulder that burden without letting our purpose splinter, I always kept a bronze plaque at the entrance of our corporate headquarters that stated our true purpose: to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us, and to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with us. Whenever the financial or mental pressure got heavy, I would look at that purpose and remind myself that I was just a steward, and that kept me humble and focused.
Let's talk about the people who helped you carry that weight. Who were the first true believers, beyond your immediate family, to buy into what you were doing? How did you convince early workers or customers to trust an entirely unproven concept?
The very first true believers were those factory workers from the Ford plant who crowded around our 10 counter stools every single day at the Dwarf Grill. They trusted us when we were just a nameless little diner. To get our early workers to trust the concept, I didn't try to pitch them on a massive empire, because I never actually planned for Chick-fil-A to become as big as it did. I just focused on building a family environment. I showed them that I was willing to wash the dirty dishes, shuck the corn, and scale the fish right alongside them. When people see that you are fully committed and that you genuinely care about their personal success and their future, they are glad to buy into the vision.
Lead us to the tipping point. Can you take us to the exact moment where you felt the momentum shift? What was the specific milestone, contract, or breakthrough where you realized we aren't just going to survive, we are going to change everything?
The real shift happened when we saw the incredible response to that first mall location at Greenbrier. When we realized that people were walking past all the other shops just to line up for a chicken sandwich, it was a beautiful breakthrough. The momentum grew so fast that we were able to start expanding into shopping malls all across the South and the West. Seeing our unique franchise model take off, where we covered the startup costs so that honest, hardworking people who didn't have a lot of capital could become business owners, that was the milestone. That was the moment I realized we weren't just running a few restaurants. We were creating a completely new way to do business and change people's lives.
You really did forge a completely unique culture. You didn't just build a company, you built a distinct philosophy that outlasted you. In the early days, when it was just a handful of people in a room, How did you instill that standard of excellence or second mile service?
It all came down to modeling it ourselves and focusing on the young people we hired. I always told our team that there are three pieces to success. You've got to want to, you've got to develop the skills, and then you've got to actually do it. In those early meetings, I emphasized that we weren't just in the chicken business, we were in the people business. I taught our team to treat every customer as if they were a guest in our own home, because of that belief that everyone possesses value and deserves to be treated with dignity. We practiced what we called second mile service, going above and beyond what was expected. And because we practiced it consistently in that small room, it became the natural standard as we grew.
Looking back now, what do you think is the greatest myth of your legacy? History books often flatten a person's life into a neat, polished narrative. What is the biggest misconception people have about your journey, your character, or how your company was actually built?
I think the biggest misconception is that it all came easy or that it was a result of some stroke of good luck. People see a large, successful company and they assume it was a smooth, calculated path from the start. But the truth is, I never sat down and drew up a grand blueprint to build a massive corporation. It was built entirely on unexpected opportunities that we just took advantage of day by day. My journey was filled with poverty, deep personal grief from losing my brothers, and plenty of business errors along the way. There was no magic formula, just decades of plain old hard work, humility, and staying true to our core principles when it would have been much easier to sell out.
Every empire requires a steep personal cost. Looking back at the entirety of your life, what was the hardest sacrifice you had to make for the sake of your vision? And was it ultimately worth it?
The hardest sacrifice was definitely the sheer amount of time and physical energy it demanded in those early decades. Working 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, meant missing out on a lot of sleep and carrying a constant weight of worry about making ends meet. It is very easy for a business to demand so much of you that you lose touch with your family. I had to be incredibly intentional to ensure that my responsibilities as a husband to my wife, Jeanette, and as a father to my children, Dan, Bubba, and Trudy, didn't get pushed aside for the sake of financial provision. It took a lot of effort to balance those worlds, but looking back at how my children grew up to treasure those same values and carry on the work with integrity, I can say with all my heart that every bit of hard work and sacrifice was absolutely worth it.
That is a powerful reminder for every entrepreneur listening. Truett, if you could send a single sentence back through time to yourself on the very first day you started this venture, knowing every trial, triumph, and heartbreak that awaited you, what would you say?
I would tell myself, keep your faith strong, work as hard as you can, and remember that you can accomplish anything if you truly want to.
That is beautiful. Truett, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with our listeners before we sign off today?
I would just like to remind everyone listening that character is your greatest asset, and it is never a burden. Take advantage of the unexpected opportunities that come your way, and always remember to serve the people around you with a humble heart. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Calvin. It has been a true joy.
The joy was all ours, Truett. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. What an incredible conversation with Truett Cathy, reminding us all that building a legendary business starts with simple commitment, treating people like family, and staying true to your core principles no matter what. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast, Founder Stories. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.